off a hole now, haven't I? Good afternoon to those in Europe or Middle East area. Good evening to those in sort of the East Asia sort of regions. Good to see you. I'm Will. Hi everyone. I'm going to warm up the chat box. Nathan, Louise, Alex, jump in if you like.
Yeah, there's loads of people don't need any prompting. There's loads of messages coming
there are already.
Argentina, Vietnam, Costa Rica. Wow.
Hello.
Coming, Mexico.
Hi everyone.
We're getting the globe here. Serbia, it's sunny there. Yep, Georgia.
Dr. Mansour, welcome back. Good to see you. Okay, so the Advancing Learning Fast Forward. We are here. This is finally the end. Finally, why do I say it like that? This is the end of season 5. It's great to see you all. I've got a weird view here. I'm just seeing. There we go. That's better. Yeah, no, great to see Louise, Alex, Nathan. And good to see people's names and comments in the chat. Keep it coming, everyone. If you come in, I find it's a lot easier when I attend any webinars. It's always easier to sort of keep the conversation going, but just try, if I say one thing, then I'm sort of, my fingers and my mind is kind of ready to chat in the chat box. So feel free to if you want to. I want to start off with a quick question today. So as this is the closing event for the academic program, I'm interested. Could you put in yes or no into the chat box to this question? Have you been to any other events in the academic program since October? So since season 5 started in October, have you been to any other of our events? And if so, does anything stand out to you? Does a particular speaker or session or blog post that you've read or blogcast or podcast that you've listened to, does any of it stand out? Does anything sort of stand out and go, I love that session, it stuck with me since I saw it?
Like,
Cambridge events. Cambridge events are a bit weird, I find. No, I'm joking. I'm sure they're great. Well, for me, one that definitely stood out, I know it's kind of cheating, but the Global Teachers Festival definitely stood out to me. The Crystals, Tatiana, absolutely. Yes. Ben Crystal, David Crystal doing a session together. Let's try and get them in again. Shall we, guys? Should we try and get them in again?
Oh, yeah.
Most definitely.
What a pair. But yeah, anyway, for me, the Global Teachers Festival, although that's like 20 talks, but I think the festival was just great, and it was really great to see so many teachers there. Nada, the question was, if you came to any other of our events, did any of them stand out to you? The speaker, the talk itself, did any session stand out to you that you've been to in the last year or so?
I'll tell you one that stood out for me, if you want.
Yeah, go ahead, Nathan. Yeah, of course.
I remember watching Miriam Monterrubio's webinar on storytelling and literacy, and the way she used those symbols as a way to engage students with the song. Remember, with the Beatles song?
Yeah.
And the way that her webinar, the way it led through to like the final point, and it was like for everybody in the webinar that the penny just kind of went, I totally get everything now. It wasn't one of those where you just learn along the way. It was like all these bits kind of all culminated to this kind of, I guess, Beatles crescendo, right? Yeah.
It was a really beautifully sort of designed training, wasn't it? It wasn't, as you said, it wasn't drip feeding tips. It was theory, quite a lot of theory, but actually then that means this.
Yeah, I love that. That was fantastic, that one.
Yeah, no, she's very talented, Miriam. Okay, I'm going to share my screen.
We're looking forward to seeing her next week, actually. She's coming to Mina.
Oh, she's coming to Mina, isn't she? She's doing a talk for you guys.
She is, yeah.
Amazing. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. Can you see that, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. Welcome, world, to the Advancing Learning Fast Forward, the closing event for the academic program. So that's that first slide. And the next slide talks about the certificates. So in about a week, not before, well, maybe before, but just assume that it will be there in a week. You're going to get an email from us with the email address that you use to register for this session. You're going to get an email from us you'll have quite a few gifts in there from us. It's quite a nice packed email for you because we're closing the season. We thought, let's just pack it up and just give everyone everything. So you'll see an email and it'll have your personalized certificate in there. If you're watching on Facebook, there'll be a link towards the end of the session, or on LinkedIn or on YouTube. There'll be a link in the chat box towards the end of the session as well, where you can get a certificate too. If you've registered for the session, if you're watching it on Zoom, then you will get a link to a virtual goodie bag, which has got some lovely goodies in there, which I will share with you later. But I think without further ado, time is very tight today. You would have seen, if you've seen any promotional stuff about this event, you would have seen that we are doing 30 tips in 90 minutes. That gives us, without any space for negotiation here, that is 3 minutes for one tip. So we've got to start cracking on. So Nathan, Louise, and Alex, best of luck. Your time starts. No, it's not right. Yeah. But I will hand over. Have a great session. Nathan's going to start us off with young learners. After that, we've got Louise giving 10 tips on teenagers. And then Alex is giving us 10 tips about adults. Oydin, you'll get the recording in the virtual goodie bag as well. Have a great session, Nathan. Speak to you later.
Thank you so much, Will, and thank you. We've started bang on time, 5 o'clock for me. So a very warm welcome to everyone this afternoon. I can see loads of comments there, people sharing where they're joining us from, as always. This is normally my first question. So where are you joining us from? But actually, I'm going to pitch then a different question to you this morning. I would like to know who here has a pet. Let me know, what kind of pets do you have? And you can let me know their names. It'd be nice to know their names as well. If you don't have a pet, maybe you can think of an unusual or exotic pet that you would like to have. And what would you call it? Oh, I see this, like these wonderful names here, look. Really nice. Okay, while people are writing in their pets, I think we got some big pet fans in the chat box here. We do want to welcome you to today's Fast Forward event. And as Will mentioned, all of the content, all of the tips that I'm using, these 10 tips for young learners, have come from content delivered in our Advancing Learning academic program over the last 8 or 9 months. It was ALAP. Does anyone know the number? Give you a clue. It was the Advancing Learning academic program season 5. And the first thing to notice is that you're only going to see me for the next 15 minutes or so. There are going to be no slides until the very end. So for this session, you can just sit back, you can relax, close your eyes, as long as you're not driving. Don't close your eyes if you're driving, keep them open. But sit back, relax, and just let the tips absorb, let's say. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Nathan, and I am a teacher trainer for Macmillan Education in the Middle East and North Africa, or MENA region, and I'm based in the beautiful city of Dubai. This is home. The window is blue sky, bright sunshine, very hot at the moment, mid-40s. But I'm staying inside of my house, very happy to be talking with you all this morning. And also, there's a big surprise in my house today, because in my house, there is a birthday today. And I'm wondering if you can guess whose birthday it might be. Again, you can use the chat box. I love all of these pets that people have been mentioning here. So while people are trying to guess, happy birthday for someone there. Yeah, amazing. Happy birthday for yesterday. Let's get straight into our tips, because we are, as Will mentioned, very short on time. And this year, I want to start with well-being and the importance of embedding social and emotional learning into our teaching and learning. Because for me, how we feel directly affects our ability to learn. It doesn't matter how good you are at delivering content, how good you are at setting up activities. If your students are emotionally tuned out, it's very difficult for them to learn and connect with the content. And we need to be careful, I think, because we send these messages to our students all the time. Our body language, the actions that we use, the words that we use, they all get interpreted by our students in a variety of ways. Think about seating plans, where students get to sit, who gets to answer questions, who gets chosen the most as the star pupil. All of these types of things, whether you're in the high achievers group or the struggling group, these have emotional consequences for our students. And we need to understand our students. We need to help them to learn how to understand their emotions. We need to help them understand their own well-being, how to look after themselves. And we also need to help them to learn how to develop healthy relationships with others. This is a big part of the young learner classroom, learning how to be involved in a community, the classroom community, working with others. So this is my first top tip, that the brain learns and flourishes within safe relationships. The classroom is a safe space. And this comes from Lena Acosta's wonderful webinar back in November on social and emotional learning. And for me, great teachers really foster healthy, respectful, and collaborative relationships between students, not just between teacher and student. Now, of course, this also helps us to create a positive classroom environment. Let's face it, learning English is really hard for young learners, especially if they don't have a lot of access to English outside of the classroom. It can feel like something alien. It lacks meaning, it lacks purpose. Why do I need this? As teachers, of course, we have our curriculum, we've got our objectives. We want our students to speak, we want them to write fluently. But sometimes our expectations, and I think sometimes parents' expectations of them, can be very, very high. And this, again, can be really overwhelming for young learners. And it can create this additional emotional barrier between them and the content that we're trying to deliver to them. So my next tip, number 2, is that we can empathize with our students. We can develop growth mindsets through positive affirmations, show them that we understand that it's difficult, and then use data and evidence to show them their progress over an extended period of time. So for example, things like, remember that first project that we did way back in September? Remember, it was chaos. We didn't know what to do. We didn't understand the instructions or how to work with others. It didn't go very well, did it? That's okay. Look at us now at the end of the academic year. See the projects that you're making now. Compare them to what we used to be able to do. See how confident you guys feel using English in front of the class now. And I take this quote from Sarah Hilliard in her webinar when she says, in fact, you guys can finish this statement if you can remember this webinar. She says, when they say they can't, we say, can anybody get it? When they say they can't, we say, see if anyone can get it. Lots of people still saying hello. We don't say hello. We say, that's right, yes. When they say they can't, we say yes. Okay, so we have this positive, respectful classroom environment where students feel a sense of belonging. But we've also got these teaching and learning objectives and outcomes too, right? Now, one of the things that strikes me, I think, hardest as I watch the journey that young learners make through their schooling is the way that pedagogical approaches to learning change as they go through the different years. So think of kindergarten classes. They're usually fun, they're creative, they're active. Activities only last a few minutes. They often use multiple senses during activities. They're doing role plays, they're drawing in the sand with their finger, they're painting. They're doing all of this active, involved, multi-sensory activities. But then let's think about and reflect upon a grade 6 classroom, the end of primary. What does that look like? Usually involves a lot of writing, a lot of worksheets, usually very focused on the exams. And this, again, has an impact on our students. Children and grade 6 students are still only 10 or 11 years old. They learn best when they're active, when they're playing, when they're exploring our content in a variety of ways through a variety of mediums. So I want you to challenge yourself in the next academic year, challenge yourself even further. I'm sure you're doing great, but challenge yourself even further to let them show evidence of their own learning in as many different ways as possible. Moving away from this idea of having 30, 40, 50 identical pieces of writing, and let them express themselves. Now, if you're not sure how to get started with that, I would recommend project-based learning. I think project-based learning is a great place to start because A, it gets them communicating and collaborating, but it lets them express themselves and personalize the content. Music, poems, acting, role plays. There are lots of digital applications they can use, things like Canva, to put things together and then create their own presentations, all using the language that we want them to use. And in addition to that, my next tip is that for me personally, I think the best way to help students understand and find meaning in the language, thinking about what I just said before, is to use stories with them. And one of my favorite webinars, as I mentioned, was Miriam Monterrubio's, in which she says storytelling is an art that has mental, social, and educational benefits for students. So not just teaching them the language. The story is not just a way to introduce the grammar. It has all of these additional benefits. Helps them to see the language in context. Helps them to develop critical thinking skills, because we've got so many opportunities for questions. Provides opportunities for them to produce language in personalized ways. Think about getting them to rewrite the ending of the story or tell the story from the perspective of a different character. This helps them to develop their ideas. But I think that stories have one more really great advantages, and that's that they create this perfect opportunity for teachers to bond with their students. Think about how parents bond with their children. Think about, if you've got children, how you bond with them. We tell them stories every day, and there's a reason why we do that. And we can adapt this and use this in class. You can tell stories, tell funny anecdotes from your weekend, take language that you want to recycle from previous units and make up funny anecdotes. They don't need to be real or personal about you. Just make up short stories. Your students will really enjoy them. You can have fun when you read stories with them. And again, I'd like to encourage people to read to them as much as you can possibly find time to do. Reading out loud is one of the most important things we can do to prepare our children to read, because it enriches their vocabulary. It establishes that reading-writing connection. It improves their listening comprehension, and it gives them an opportunity to share their thoughts and feelings. And again, reading with students can be quite challenging because there's a teacher-student dynamic. Again, if we think about an activity in the classroom, if I just put 5 pictures on the board or 5 words on the board, and I just pick on students, Will, stand up and tell me word number 1. It's scary for young learners. They're very young because you are the teacher. You have expectations. They're being watched by their peers. So think about ways that you can break down that power dynamic. I've got one. First one is we could use a puppet. So instead of telling me, the teacher, the answer, if they're shy or nervous, they could come up and whisper it into Elephant's ear. And then Elephant, maybe he could act it out. If it's an emotion, he could be sad or he could be happy. And the rest of the group then get a chance to be involved and also practice the language. We could take that one step further and we could introduce a second puppet. And you could give the students the puppets and they can, again, talk to each other through the medium of the puppet. And this is a really nice way of getting them to use the language, but not realize, because they're thinking about the puppet and they're thinking about how they're going to interact with that puppet rather than what is it that I'm going to actually say, which is a nice thing for them to do. Of course, the other benefit of using more stories is that it can also enhance and improve their writing. Now, the answer to better writing is not, as people might expect, doing more writing. It is actually doing more reading. And doing more reading with them, doing more stories with them, helps them to develop their own ideas, and it helps them to find their own inner voice. And our challenge to you is that you might find the next budding Shakespeare in your classroom. And that's tip number 5. Seek out those budding Shakespeares. And you're not going to do that if they're all writing exactly the same thing or copying things from the course book. They've got to have the opportunity to think about, prepare, and actually write down their ideas. Okay, now all of this sounds great, right? But of course, classrooms are full of young children who are energetic, and things don't always go according to plan. Young children can very easily get distracted. But my next tip is that we as teachers and our content can become the distraction through proactive planning. Quite often we take a reactive approach when students get distracted or aren't paying attention. We do, Will, wake up. Will, pay attention to the board, or have you finished your task yet? But actually we want to change this. We want to flip this dynamic and become more proactive. We cannot just assume that our content is just going to be motivating for our students. And maybe you want to share in the chat box any creative approaches to getting students engaged that you use in your classroom. I'm going to give you one example, and it's moving away from this idea of what I think is probably one of the least motivating things we can say as teachers, which is, of course, open your books to page 37. This is what we're going to do. We want to get into the psychology of young learners. So let's think about a party. What makes you want to go to a party? Now, of course, the party itself, the people, the activities, the games, cake, who doesn't love cake? But what makes you want to go in the first place is usually the invitation, how somebody sets up the party and that they're inviting you to. So before the story, for example, if we're thinking about story time, we can do lots of pre-reading and pre-story activities, things that make them want to listen to the story, hooks them in. For example, we give them just the title and they could create a poster, or they could use the title to predict the story and make short TikTok style role play videos that they could then present. We could give them one character and get them to write an email to that character, asking them questions about what they think the story is going to be about. These are all prediction skills which help them in their writing. We could give each table a different character and then use this idea of sensory activities. So table 1, you've got the main character and you're going to write them an email. Table 2, you've got the dog. So I want you to use modeling clay to create his house and maybe what he eats. And again, they're using and recycling that language all the time. Table 3, you can have something else, and we could use different things with them. We could hide parts of the story around the room, get them to sequence them. I think there are lots and lots of ways we can create anticipation and generate student ideas. And I actually did this with you in this webinar. Think about what I did right at the very beginning of the webinar. I told you about a birthday, but I didn't tell you whose birthday it was. Lots of people were guessing. And I wanted to see whether or not you would pick up on the other technique I used, which was to drop a topic, but not actually go straight into it. So who can remember what question I asked right at the very beginning and how that linked to the birthday? Anybody get it? I think quite a few people did. Because, yes, of course, I have a pet, I have a dog, his name is Oreo, and he is 2 years old today. Today is Oreo's birthday. And if you're lucky, you might get to meet him at the end. I will, again, create that sense of anticipation, keep you here for another few minutes. But moving on, because I want to make sure we get to the end in the time that we have. My next tip, number 7, is to help students find meaning in our content through culture. So helping them to understand that English exists and has purpose beyond the classroom, out there in the real world. And we can use culture to plant the seeds of curiosity in our young learners, get them thinking about the world around them. And to do this, we can use Sarah Hilliard's mirrors and windows approach, if any of you managed to watch this webinar. The window is us looking out onto different cultures, learning that there are different ways of seeing the world. And the mirror then reflects our own culture back on us because we've got a point of reference, something to compare that to what we believe and how we live in our own communities. So in this way, culture is not only about teaching content, it's about planting the seeds of curiosity, which young learners already have, and also celebrating our own culture and other cultures too. So helping students to develop an open mind. Developing this intercultural awareness then helps students to see that whoever you are and wherever you are, smiles are all the same. And children, especially young children, they need and they want to feel that they belong. They like feeling safe spaces. We can create that for them. And then we can allow them to embrace culture through their own eyes as well as seeing the world through the eyes of others. So as we come to the end, I think it's pretty clear from a lot of these tips that I believe that the brain is a social organ and it learns best in social situations. So my tip is that we create as many social situations for our students in the classroom. One way we can do this, for example, is to flip the classroom, because that gives lesson time much more space for collaborative, communicative activities, making lesson time active and multisensory, as we mentioned before with those examples, and full of opportunities to develop those 5 aspects of social and emotional learning, which are self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making. Those 5 key points of social and emotional learning, which we can help through our content students to develop. And so we come to the final top tip of today, and that is that every child matters. Each student brings their own personality, their own interests, their own abilities, their own challenges. And our job is to take all of that and create a classroom environment where no matter who they are, they feel a sense of belonging, they feel respected, they feel valued, they feel accepted, and this allows them to do their best work. Now, this isn't as easy as it sounds, because we're not just trying to make sure that all students are involved. But a lot of people think that inclusion is about getting everybody together, making sure they're involved. But actually, it's more than that. It's constant effort, it's proactive, finding and breaking down the barriers to learning that exist for your students. And there are many, and they can be in different forms and shapes. For example, they could be physical barriers. For example, in the student's voice, this would be easier to write if this pencil wasn't so thin. I didn't do my best writing. Now the teacher thinks I cannot write, and I've been put into a weaker group. But it was just the pencil. I just couldn't hold it. That's a barrier. It could be a cognitive barrier. I find this reading long and difficult, and the letters jump on the page. If only I could watch a video at home first in my own time and at my own pace, I might understand the story. It could be an emotional barrier. My parents were fighting again all night long, and I couldn't sleep. I wish I could just sleep here on my desk. And the list of barriers can go on and on and on. So as we head off for the summer, I hope that this session and these 10 tips and all of the other tips today inspire you to challenge yourself in the new academic year and ask yourself, what can I do to make learning in my classroom even better? And I'm sure that's already amazing, but even better and even more inclusive next year. Thank you very much, everybody.
That was wonderful. Thank you so much, Nathan. Really, really good, great ideas, which you can all see here, all the tips on the screen now, the 10 tips for young learners. And there's so many ideas there. And I think it's so lovely the way you've linked them so that you're telling a story, aren't you?
Oh, I'm trying.
Absolutely. And the ideas, for example, the mirrors and windows idea, the storytelling as being something that we should do as much as possible in the classroom, with all those examples and the practical application of it. It's not just talking about it. It's not just theorizing on the benefits of these different ideas, but actually putting them into practice. And we can do that in a very concrete way. So that was wonderful.
And I think with the stories, Louise, I think that traditional ELT taught us that we need to teach the vocabulary and the grammar so that they can understand the story. And I think we're moving on from that a lot. They actually absorb that language through the story. They don't need to be exposed to it first.
Exactly.
We do the pre-reading to set them up, to get them thinking about ideas and feelings and all these types of things. But the actual story itself is a vessel. It's not a way to deliver content.
Exactly. Yes, and also the story. I mean, there are different ways, as you say, into the story, and it's about connecting. You're talking about connecting with the learners, with even though they're very young, connecting on a sensory, multi-sensory level. There are different avenues in before we look at the language. The language, as you say, will come, and there will be opportunities in a very natural way. Stop and start, and take that moment when the opportunity arises to perhaps focus a little bit more explicitly on the language, but not to have it as a kind of plan that, oh, I've got to do this at this time, but actually listen to and observe what's actually going on in us. Yeah,
definitely pay attention to dynamics within the classroom for sure. But again, I think a really key part of teaching young learners is realizing that they don't learn content when you deliver it to them. They need to see that content recycled and reinforced over and over and over again, which is one of the reasons why, I mean, when I taught 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds, they would ask for the same song. They would do that song. And for me as a teacher, it was like, I'm in bed at night, like this
really?
song, I cannot listen to this song anymore. But they love it, and they love it because of that. They remember that vocabulary through the songs, the stories, the chants.
Absolutely.
I'm not in one.
Yes. Brilliant. There is a question. Well, there's a question that came through on LinkedIn. It's from Jayran Abdulazadeh. He's asking about what to do when you have in a young learner's class a student who is stuck, as he says, in a very low level and doing these kind of activities. Perhaps it's a question, I mean, you're talking about diversity. You're recognizing all the different abilities within any one class, even though you might do a level test, for example, with the students. Nevertheless, there will be differences, both at a linguistic and non-linguistic level as well. So presumably there needs to be an element of adaptation.
Absolutely, yeah. Differentiating our content is certainly one way to help them engage with it. But I think we need to just be very careful that we don't pigeonhole students. They could be weak in one thing, but strong in something else, but they end up in a weak group for everything. And that I think is really damaging, I think, for students. When we're talking before about this sense of belonging, if you have these three groups, strong, average, I don't know what average really is supposed to be, but we call them average students, which is like 80% of the class. And then we've got the table of weaker students. That's not belonging, because whichever group you're in, you feel like you don't belong in the other groups. So we need to try to shift them around. And this is why I use this example with the puppets, is that you can get them, if they don't know an answer, it doesn't mean they're weak. It might mean they need a bit more time or a bit more support. So we do things like, why don't you find a friend who can help you, and you and your friend can both come up and they will help you, give you the word that you want to whisper, because they know sometimes it's in their head. They just can't get it out, and we can't really judge them for that. Someone's birthday is, who wants to say, here he is.
Happy birthday, Oreo.
What's the treat? I'm sure people wanted to see. That was the anticipation at the end of the half an hour.
But that was lovely, the way you set us up,
I tried, yes. Create that.
Worked well then.
Thank you, everybody, for the happy birthday.
Thank you, Nathan. Thank you so much.
Louise, thank you so much, and best of luck moving into this session. I know I've already seen this, so I know how fantastic the next 10 tips are going to be for everybody. So they're setting more anticipation for the next half an hour.
Thank you very much, and see you later.
Thanks, Louise. See you in a bit. Thank you very much, everybody.
Okay, that was wonderful. Ah, my God, how to follow that, eh? That's a tall order. Well, before I go into my tips, I would like to share a very special video with you. As you know, and as Will said at the beginning, this event is closing the season of Advancing Learning academic program. Do you remember which number season it is? Is it 1? Is it 2? Is it 3? Is it 4? Is it 5? If you want to put it in the chat. Ah, very good, Bunny. Very good. You're all on the ball. You're all paying attention. Fantastic. So we're going to take a little break to prepare the next season, okay? And the next season will be in a couple of months' time. But before we finish this season, we just want to look back over the year. And we've compiled a lovely video for you that we want to share now of season 5 this season. Thank you.
Great teaching happens in every corner of this planet. With teachers' dedication, inspiration, and desire to advance themselves, they offer their students the greatest possible gift. The gift of good, solid learning. The Advancing Learning academic program is our gift to you to help you deliver great teaching no matter your context. In our biggest season so far, we've seen a whole range of training, big and small, including the world-famous Global Teachers Festival back in February. We've seen topics like social emotional learning, culture in the classroom, the age-old mystery of motivation, English as a lingua franca, hybrid teaching. I could go on. And on. And on. So whenever you're ready to continue your teaching journey, the Advancing Learning academic program will be waiting. Go to macmillanenglish.com/ALAP to find the right training for you for free now.
Wow, it's been a busy season, hasn't it? A really, really busy season with so many topics that have been covered over the season with so many wonderful speakers. I lost count of the number, but there are lots and lots and lots with such striking insights into teaching, but with also at the same time a really practical approach about how can we actually do this in our classes. So we're coming to the end of the season, and I'm coming on now to talk about teenagers. And I've had the pleasure over the last while to look back at the season, look back at these wonderful webinars, these advancing learning cafes, the blog posts, etc. And I've come up with 10 tips for you, 10 ideas that really stood out for me, that were salient points in this season for teenagers. So the first idea I would like to share with you is this: be focused and pay attention yourself, ourselves as teachers, before inviting your students, our students, to do so. And I've taken this from a webinar by Emma Reynolds, who presented in the Global Teachers Festival webinar back in February, and it's called Stress Busting Meditations for Busy Teachers. And I was really struck by the ideas that she put forward. And I thought back to my own career as a teacher, and I asked myself, ooh, you know, how many times did I do this myself? And to be honest with you, it was an area that I don't think I gave so much attention to, and certainly not enough attention as I should have. And Emma, she points out that as teachers, we probably, over the school year, we probably say 1,000 times, okay, that might be an exaggeration, but many, many, many times over the school year, would you pay attention, come back on task. Oh, look, listen to me. But okay, we can do that, but what kind of effect does it have? And is it going to really make a difference just by saying, pay attention, pay attention? And Emma, she puts to us some really good questions, I think, which are, do you know how to pay attention yourself? Do we as teachers know how to pay attention? And do we teach them, our students, to pay attention? And so I'm going to invite you in the chat box to write, if you would like, any ideas that you use, or activities that you use, or techniques that you use to help you as the teacher to pay attention and set yourself up for class. So I'll just give you a few seconds, a few minutes. Ah, I like that. Ooh, listen to jazz. I hear you. Some other people, for example, what I do when I'm before, not just teaching, but also for other things like classes I do myself, I receive classes, I do exercise, I stretch out. I kind of physically, I'm quite a physical person. I need to do a lot of exercise. Other people are saying, yes, okay, Tatiana, the same, prepare, look at trees. I like that. Yes, stop and just observe. Absolutely. Some people close their eyes, some people write a plan, as Anna said, some people listen to music, some people prepare their games and activities, as Ina says. Oh, and Ina says no phones. Yes, I hear you as well. I absolutely agree with you, because the tendency is with your mobile, constantly checking your phone. So yes, this question, do you know how to pay attention yourself? And do you teach them how to pay attention, not just assume that because you say pay attention, that they will do so. So before we can help students to be focused, we, the teachers, must be focused and pay attention ourselves. And this is a skill we can practice. We can actually put into practice, as we've just shared here in the chat box, the techniques that we use in order to focus our attention. Emma shared some really nice ideas with us, practical, effective meditation exercises in her webinar, such as the 3-step breathing space or the 5 senses practice. These are exercises that we can do throughout the year ourselves. We can do them before we go into class, we can do them at the end of class, and also with our students at different points, not just at the beginning of the class or at the end of the class, but maybe at different points during the class, or one point during the class when you feel that things are slightly losing track and you want to bring people back on board. But absolutely, key is first and foremost, for them to be really effective in our classes, we need to apply them ourselves. And although Emma doesn't actually say this directly or explicitly, I will. I think that good practice here might be summed up as practice ourselves first what we preach. We need to put it into practice. Now, the thing is, our students still may continue to be distracted. It's true, absolutely. And it's difficult for anybody. I'm sure you as well, now that you're here with us, you're present at this webinar, listening to us talk, your attention can stray, of course, very easily as well. That's just a fact of life. But lack of focus, both for us and for our students, causes us to become distracted. And so we pick up our phone and we start looking at our messages. And if students are unfocused and distracted, of course, it's very difficult for learning to take place. So tip number 2, before you start teaching, help students to concentrate and focus. And I've taken my lead from Chaz Pugliese in his blog post article, which, by the way, is also a recording. It's recorded as a listening, and it's called Why Aren't They Paying Attention? You might have asked yourself that question many times yourself. And he shows us how to do this in a very practical way. We can use practical mindfulness meditation practice techniques to address this. Play memory, concentration games to help students learn to focus better and longer. For example, you could try an exercise where you ask students to calm the mind. They could close their eyes, or if they don't feel comfortable about closing their eyes, they could gaze down at the floor, put their gaze down and listen. And you prompt them with an idea. Think about what's working. Reflect on what's challenging your focus. Or another idea, ask your students to close their eyes or put their gaze on the ground, turn their attention to their thoughts and take stock. And next, you could invite them to focus on the point of contact where their body meets the chair or their feet touch the floor. And you can invite them to imagine that their thoughts are like clouds and they are swept away by the wind. And then next, you can ask them to be aware of their breathing. If they want to, they can say, I'm breathing in and I'm breathing out to accompany every inspiration, every expiration. And every time a thought appears, tell them to accept it and go back to the breath. It's not about fighting against, it's about accepting and going with the flow. And finally, you can ask them to wriggle their fingers and toes and then open their eyes or lift up their gaze. So these are really nice ideas, I think, to help our students. Now, obviously, when you start this first with teenage students in particular, maybe there's a moment of, or there's a period of feeling uncomfortable. Maybe students start giggling or don't take it seriously. Consider ways of how to deal with that. Maybe what you want to do for this first term is choose an activity and maybe just take one part of it. For example, close your eyes or look down at the floor and just focus on your breathing for a couple of seconds. It doesn't have to be a long exercise. Breathe in, breathe out, and then ask them to open their eyes or look up again and ask them, how do you feel? And maybe prompt them with a couple of adjectives. So there are ways we can adapt these ideas. And this idea leads me on very nicely to tip number 3, which comes from a webinar by Chaz Pugliese again, helping our teams manage their emotions, and a blog post article, which again is recorded as a listening by Anna Hasper, Managing Stress, Wellbeing During Exams. And the tip is, help students recognize their emotions and examine how they affect them. So then students can decide if they want to stay in that feeling or emotion or not. Okay, so how can we do that? Well, we've got some very practical ideas from this webinar and from the blog post. For example, getting students to notice and name feelings. You can start by getting them just to notice how they feel as things happen. Say the name of the feeling to themselves. They might feel proud when something goes well, or disappointed if they don't do well on a test or an exam. They might feel relaxed when sitting with friends at lunch, or nervous before a test or an exam. Another idea, tracking one's emotions. So students could track their emotion over a period of time, maybe the morning, maybe the afternoon, maybe the whole day, or maybe part of the morning or part of the afternoon, or just in the class itself. So notice how often you feel it. That's the idea. How often do you feel this emotion? Maybe you're glad when something good happens, or glad when a friend shows up, or maybe you're glad when someone lends you a hand or says a kind word, or glad just because it's Friday and the weekend is coming up. Every time you feel glad, encourage the students, make a mental note to yourself or write it down. And maybe get them to think, is the feeling very strong, or is it weak? Or is it mild or medium? How to measure it? Because it's important to be aware for us, the students, we, the teachers, to be aware exactly what we're feeling. Nathan talked about the emotional side of learning and how key that is. It is the bedrock, because no learning will take place unless we're in the right balanced emotional state. And that leads also on to another idea, which is a third idea from the webinar and from the blog post, noticing feelings, not just in ourselves, but maybe moving out and looking at art, songs, movies. Focus on what the artist did, the director did to show the feelings, and encouraging students to respond with a feeling. How do you feel in response to this, to the film or the extract from the film, or the painting or the song? And when we talk about emotions and stress, of course, we all know a big source of stress for our teens is doing exams, tests, external exams. And this leads me to tip number 4. Really, the key to succeeding in exams, apart from having the necessary knowledge, we know obviously that you need linguistic ability, a certain level of that. You need to know the exam and understand how it works. You need techniques, you need strategies, but a key element, and I think Nathan mentioned it earlier, is that in recent years, we've begun to really realize the importance, the key importance of managing well-being during this stressful period in their lives. Exams are stressful, but when Nathan said, for example, to improve writing, it's not a question of doing more writing. It's actually a question of doing more reading or exposing students to more content, etc. In the same way with this question, well-being with exams is not about just being able to write the question for the exam, but is how you feel. Are you relaxed? Are you ready mentally and emotionally to deal with the exam? And Anna Hasper points out in the same blog post article that I mentioned earlier, Managing Stress, Well-being During Exams, once students are able to identify their emotions, it's really important for them to regulate them, manage them, so that they can make use of their mental resources again. And I've just chosen one activity from Anne's really practical blog post article, and that's the worry tree. I thought it was a wonderful idea. The idea that we have worries. This is a fact. The students will be worried. They will have concerns. And what a wonderful idea to be able to explicitly express them, but in a positive way, in the sense of identifying them and using that identification of the emotions to think about the problems in a more organized way, as a worry tree. And that in itself will help the students calm their minds and kind of externalize those worries, and perhaps show them that really, okay, they're worries, but maybe they're not as big as I thought initially. Okay, so continuing on the subject of exams, I'd like to move now to tip number 5. Because exams are obviously really important for students, but they're very, very important for teachers because they give us really important information. Tip number 5, collect information from exams and use it to enhance your teaching. And I've taken this from Ethan Mansour's Global Teachers Festival talk, promoting positive washback. Now, some of you will probably know what washback is, maybe others know. But washback is basically, to sum up, washback is important information from an exam that can have a positive or negative impact on the student. So it's basically exams can have a positive or negative impact on students, but that impact is important information for us, which we can use to help in our teaching, to help our students to improve. And so practical ways to do that. We may need to go over a certain topic students have not mastered yet. that may be information we get back from the exam result. We as teachers, we have a significant impact on the amount of washback there is and whether it is positive or negative. So maybe we need to think about, oh, how am I doing this? Maybe I need to think about this again. Maybe I need to reorganize my class a bit differently. Maybe I need to consider other aspects. Maybe I need to lead into things more gently, etc. So it gives us really, really, really excellent information, which we can collect, valuable information about students that will help to inform and influence how we teach, as well as where and what we review and readjust and reteach. And in large classes, because we generally, most of us, a lot of us anyway, have large numbers of students in classes, you might find that the particular class doesn't do well on a test or an exam. Well, it's an opportunity. We need to reflect back on the teaching. The question arises, are there areas that need reinforcement or teaching in a different way, for example, and make those necessary adjustments in the future? Or if we think about formative assessment, for example, we could use exit tickets, brief quizzes, thumbs up, thumbs down. These are good ways as well to gather information on where students are and where we need to go next. Okay, we're talking about exams, but you know, in teen classes, there's so many opportunities to, I mean, it's a wonderful period in students' lives, isn't it? I know a lot of people say, oh, teens, they're difficult, they're going through so many problems. Well, yes, they are going through big changes, but it doesn't necessarily have to be seen as a problem all the time. It's a wonderful period in their life when they're opening up to the world. And my tip number 6 would be open their hearts and minds to the world. And Dave Spencer, in another Global Teachers Festival webinar talk, Opening Teenagers' Hearts and Minds to the World, he shows us a letter. I thought it was wonderful, from Isaac Asimov. You probably know, a lot of you, that he was a science fiction author, and he wrote to a class in a school in Troy in Michigan, the US, way back in 71. And Asimov, in that letter to those students in that class in Michigan, he compared the library to a spaceship. Wow, a time machine that would take the students to the farthest reaches of the universe, to the far past and the far future. And Dave, in the webinar, he beautifully draws an analogy between the library and the classroom, and in particular, the potential of course books or textbooks to transport our students to other places, to give them access to information on many different topics, events that are taking place around the world. In short, a good textbook with varied real-world content. But it doesn't stop there, does it? No, we are not just exposing our students to knowledge. We're not just imparting information, content, whether it be language or not necessarily language related. They're not empty vessels. We are also cultivating attitudes by encouraging a personal response to the content, how the students react to what they find out. For example, Nathan earlier was talking about different ways into the reading. You know, the traditional way of, I don't know, lead in and then do the reading and then do a series of questions. But there are other ways to kind of get in and engage and connect with the students on an emotional and cultural and linguistic way. And getting students to react to what they find out. For example, if they read about different traditions, customs in different countries, how they feel about them. Because by giving students a voice, by teasing out their attitudes to different people, different cultures in the world, we are, as Dave Spencer really well puts, we're trying to build the importance of respect, openness, suspending judgment, curiosity, tolerating ambiguity, viewing it as a positive experience, as an opportunity. And Dave also says the great thing about teaching teens, and I agree with him on this, is that they are discovering the world. They are gradually opening their eyes to the world and everything that is around them. And we as teachers have the privilege of being there to open their eyes, to be the guides, and the materials we are using are also helping to guide them. Now, in the chat, if you would like to put, do you agree with this? Do you feel that you are opening your students, your teenage students, their eyes to the world, to the culture, the world around them? Because if you are, I think, wow, you know, what more exciting and important role you are playing in your students' lives. So, however, the journey of discovery doesn't begin and end with the course book, does it? The course book could be a springboard. Dave, in that webinar, talks about building on the textbook. So tip number 3, build on your textbook, build on your course book. We can go one step further and draw our students' attention to the Googleability of text. I love that. Dave coined that. I'm not sure if he actually coined it or somebody else, but the Googleability of texts. Get students to Google the people, the places, the events in the text, whether it be a reading, a listening, a video, so long as the content is real. And that's key. It's not invented, it's real. So students can actually go further. And that gives a tremendous sense of achievement and keeps pushing the learning. And it also bridges what Dave calls the gap between the English class coursebook and the world outside. Okay, now I'm coming to the second last tip, and it's really in tandem with this broad outreaching approach that I've been talking about. My tip for number 9 is it comes from a webinar talk, again in the Global Teachers Festival, and this time Jade Blue, her talk using images to explore culture. And the tip is make sure your curriculum includes activities that engage all of the senses, to stimulate multiple senses in your curriculum so that the instruction is most effective and memorable. We go back to the idea that Nathan talked about, I mentioned earlier as well. We have big classes. We have classes with people. They're not, I use the word students, but they're people, and they have different strengths. They have different abilities. They have different experiences and different emotions. And if we can take a multi-sensory approach, include different media in our classroom, that will help to reach a greater audience. So bring the real world into the classroom, make learning context-based, use photos, use pictures, ask learners to identify aspects of culture, choose one of the people in the image and write a short text from the perspective of that person about the cultural aspect they chose. There are so many ways, and there are many ways I'm sure that you already use yourself. So in the chat box, if you would like to put any idea there, we'll refer to it at the end. But please do share your ideas. How do you, well, directly, do you include activities that engage all of the senses of your students or a variety of senses in your classes? And now, as we're coming to the end of this section, not just of this section of this webinar, but also, I'd say, the school year, for many of us at least, I think it's very appropriate to round off these tips by well, kind of looking back to the beginning of the season and drawing your attention to what when I saw it, felt was a really, really powerful idea that was put forward by Emma Heiderman in the Back to School Advancing Learning Cafe. And it was called A Letter to My Future Friend, or my future self, rather. A letter to my future self. And the tip I want to share with you is set realistic, personalized goals to be evaluated at concrete points in the year. And Emma did an amazing job. She took us through the various stages of the activity. She got us to do it. And then she explained how she would do it, or she has done it with her students in the class, preparing the letter on a horizontal blank piece of paper with 3 outer circles, a circle on the left to represent free time, your house on the right, school at the top, and a circle in the middle for the students to put their own avatar, which could be a drawing. And in my case, for example, because I have a cat, I've had him for years and I'm really attached to him, I'd probably put a cat in there. And then underneath the picture to draw, underneath the circles, to draw a picture to represent a goal or an objective for each one, with a sentence underneath to describe the goal. Okay. But the thing is, what was beautiful about this is she really broke it down into very bite-sized, achievable steps and stages, with lots of scaffolding for the students in terms of language and also ideas, because sometimes, well, you know, we run out of ideas, or we don't have ideas, or we're put on the spot. So giving time for students to come up with ideas, or giving them some examples to prompt ideas in them, that's always a good idea. And the key to the whole exercise for me was checking in at concrete points of the year. For example, in December, as a midway point, to see how progress is going and whether we need to make some changes if necessary, or the students need to make some changes. And again in June, as an end point, to evaluate where they've got to over the year. But the icing on the cake, what was for me really, really, truly, I don't know, special, was the added, not extra, the added idea of the teacher creating a checklist manager, a list of concrete achievable tasks for students to complete, and not the same for all, but particular to the individual students, to their needs, their abilities. And it was brilliantly linked to a project that they were going to do on a person the students admired. And what I thought was really novel about this was that all of this came out of Emma's realization that she needed to give her students more space in her lessons, space for them to contribute their ideas, their goals, to personalize, to give something of themselves. And it really allowed her students, she said, to flourish. It gave them more voice. It gave them more agency to take more control of their learning. And if you haven't already seen or watched the webinar, she did that in a very, very structured way. It's not pie in the sky. It's very, very achievable. And if by any chance you have done this activity with your students, why don't you let us know now in the chat how it's going, or went, as we're approaching the end of the school year. And if not, well, I invite you to take up the challenge in September. So I hope you found these ideas, this snapshot of what I think were the key salient points that came out of the webinar season for teens this year. Hi, Alex.
Hi, Louise. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing great. Great. Thank you. Wow, that was amazing. Thank you so much for these contributions. Really helpful. And it's a great opportunity for us to put ourselves in the students' shoes. So I love the examples that you gave us, the one that from the time machine, just the library, the analogies.
Yeah.
Really great stuff. And I have a quick question for you here that it's been popped in the chat here about concentration. Because I mean, with teenagers, I think Hoy Murad Usupov, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it correctly, but he asks us, because obviously with teens, there's the fact that they have, phones and other
Yes.
sources of attention that could distract them for the lesson. So anything that we can do about maybe not using phones, or if we are to use phones, then how can we help with concentration issues?
Yes. Well, there are schools that have a no phone policy, and indeed, one person suggested no phones as an important element of trying to get focused and on track, and have a clear state of mind, so that we're not picking up the phone and checking messages every 2 seconds. So there could be that, but also it might not be the case in certain schools, and at the same time, you might want to use that phone for a constructive purpose at some point in the lesson. I think it's a question of, at the beginning of the year, establishing some ground rules, or deciding as a group, so it's not just teacher-led, but coming up with a list of rules, and you could identify different areas, like phones could be one, noise level. I don't know, for example, I'm in Spain, right? And often in class, a lot of students can be speaking at the same time. It's quite it's a natural feature, but it can raise the noise level. So I've had created with the students, because the students are affected by it as well. It's not just the teacher, the students are affected. So the idea is to present this idea as something beneficial to the whole group. And can we come up with some key, maybe not a big list, again, it's this idea, aspirations are wonderful, but look, if we don't put any of this into practice, if it's not feasible, what's the point? So maybe you come up, instead of 10, I've had 10 tips here, but in a class, maybe 5 key points, 4 or 5 key, and agree on them. And let's work on it. And now we'll have to go back and we'll have to renegotiate maybe, because we're dealing, as I said before, we're dealing with people, not students. We're dealing with people. They're not robots, they're not students, they are people, and they have their phones. And look, it's not just the students who are looking at the phones. We as teachers are probably looking at the phones a lot during our day as well. And so it's becoming aware of that, and maybe creating that space at the beginning of the year to reflect on this and establish new basic norms of behavior.
Absolutely.
To help the class environment for all. This idea of all, it's not just the teacher, it's everybody.
Absolutely. That's definitely the best way to go, to set clear expectation. I love the fact that you've mentioned rules, if it's agreed, if it's great for every party, everybody's aware, then it's all that matters. So perfect.
But it's not a perfect world.
It's not a perfect world, exactly. And we as teachers, we have to adjust at all times, and that's the beauty of like being able to juggle on the fly, and to really let let's say the context also help us, guide us through the processes, for sure. I mean that was the main question that I've picked here. So perfect.
I'm just checking to see if anybody said they'd used any of those. Well, Emma Heidemann's idea in that webinar for a letter to my future self. Did anyone? I'm just seeing. Just yes. Yeah. Tip 1, very interesting. Thank you, sir. Yeah. Well, if you haven't, people, I seriously, I challenge you to do it. Next course, 2023, 2024. have a go, look at it, think about putting it into practice. Okay, thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Louise. Thank
Yeah.
you. Congrats on the session. And
Thank
we'll
you.
see you,
And
we'll
you,
see you
good
in a
luck. Yeah, see you in a bit. Bye.
bit. Bye-bye. All right, all right. So welcome everyone to the young adults and adults slot. And I'm Alex Tamulis, and it's great to be here with y'all. Let me just jump right in and give you some of the tips. Real quick, though, I just wanted to quickly ask you in the chat there, what's your favorite time of the day? I mean, are you like a morning person? Are you more of like a lunchtime person, or do you like to watch the sunset? A lot of people are just saying morning. Wow. I mean, you get primed up. And do you have like coffee or, in order for you to get, wow, everybody's just a morning person. Oh, somebody there is a noon person. Okay. But y'all just like to really, okay, there's one night owl there. That's awesome. It's interesting because, I mean, obviously, that really influences how we go about in the world, right? I mean, things that we like to do, or how we plan our day. So this is just something that I begin to understand your context. So I'm trying to put myself in your shoes, because I'm more of like, let's say late afternoon type of, like, it's the time of day that I'm really most primed for. So it's interesting. I have to put myself in a position where I see the world, or I try to see the world from your lens, or your perspective, your shoes, right? So to be in your shoes, that's because that's some of the aspects that we're going to discuss now. And I'm going to start with tip number 1, which is to encourage students' creativity. I mean, every time, and this comes actually from Nick Peachy from one of his sessions that's called Overcoming Learner Fatigue. And basically, in order for us to incorporate creativity, we have to mix activities. We have to really try to adapt our teaching methods, right? And there are many ways to do so. We can do group discussions, we can do interactive games, we can do lots of multimedia these days, right? So it's all about using different resources to facilitate and to give students the opportunity, right? Because what we want is to maintain interest and engagement. So one idea that I'm going to give you here is to do like a quote brainstorming. So we can grab any quote. I mean, it could be a famous quote, or it could be a quote from somebody you know. So for example, let's say a quote like, if there's no struggle, there is no, and I just say, how would you complete that, right? If there's no struggle, there's no, and here it's not really to guess the correct one. It's not about that. It's just to try and come up with ideas. So Nick gives us example, if there's no struggle, there's no hope there. I like Natasha, there's no success. But what's funny is that Nick, in his session, he says, if there's no struggle, there's no chocolate, because he does some positive reward with chocolate. So it's fun because it's also related to the emotional aspect. And a lot of times teachers we have opportunities to really focus on this emotional aspect as well. So yeah, but you're right. I mean, if there's no struggle, there's no progress, or there's no success. That's a famous quote from Frederick Douglass. But I could have done, for example, let's say, a small step for a man, a giant leap for, and then, so it's just, these little things that we can do to try and prime, yeah, like mankind there. But at the same time, what could be something else, right? I mean, let's just try and find ways to frog. I love that. That's it, so we create the opportunities, we make things personal. And so basically tip number 1 is always try to work with creativity. I mean, and creativity can be something as simple as just drawing like circles on a piece of paper, and just say, hey, how would you link them, or what comes to your mind when you see these circles, right? So basically providing the opportunity through various resources. Yeah, passion there, doodles. Thank you so much for the contributions there. All right, so let's go to tip number 2. Tip number 2 is to introduce critical thinking in your classroom. And this comes from Andre Hedlund from the session Past and Future of Teaching. And he says basically that one way is how to ask better questions, right? He says we have to ask open-ended questions, questions that are specific, relevant, questions that stimulate dialogue, right? To get feedback from each other, because it's all about collaboration in the classroom. So, we could help students, clarify goals, work with assumptions, right? Identify gaps and opportunities. They can do projects together, like Medea is saying there, inspiration, stimulation. So it's basically something else that we can do is ask the 5 whys. There's an algorithm, which is a fancy way to say a list of instructions. And we can say, well, what's the main core of the project? And then we say why, right? For example, let's say, we have to guide them. If it's, let's say, basic students, basic level students, young adults, we can still give them sentence starters, right? We can do in order for us to develop this bond, but it's always about really providing the opportunity. But then we can give them prompts, we can guide them, and just asking why, for example, right? And the more you ask, the more you're going to notice that you're going to be able to pin down to really find the, let's say, the core of that question that you're dealing with. So that was something that Andre has mentioned, and it stuck with me for tip number 2. All right, just trying to be cautious of time here. So tip number 3, that is to put in extra effort as proof of learning. And basically, this comes from Karolina Kotorowicz-Jasinska, and she. It's really interesting because we basically. Let me just ask you a question here. Who remembers where the fire extinguisher is? In the office, for example, if you go to the office or in your building, do you remember? I mean, let's be honest. Where the fire extinguisher is? Okay, some people are saying yes, sure. Some people say I don't have one. Wow, that's dangerous. You don't have one there. Okay, well, someone had a fire drill. That's great. Anyhow, most of us, and I'm going to be honest with you, we're not the best judges of how learning has taken place, because that's the thing. That's the difference between exposure and the difference between learning. And the fire extinguisher, for me, I have no idea. Here in the office at Macmillan now, I don't know where it is, and I have to, but I'm exposed to it every day. I bump into it. I walk past it every day. So the same thing happens with exposure. Exposure is important, but for learning to take place, for you to acquire, you need to internalize. You need to have an experience, right? We have to somehow do an activity. And the best way for us to work would be, for example, to create a story. So I can try and say, hey, what if I had some sort of like Greek epic or tragedy or any story related to the fire extinguisher and to the place that it is located here. Now I've made it personal. So now I can share experiences. Exactly. We can create a story, because as humans, we're really drawn to the story patterns. And due to this extra effort, the chances are that your brain will be more likely to retain that content. So again, yeah, people can be exposed to things, but at the same time, we need to make sure that it is personal, that we have opportunities to internalize it. So, like gap filling, stories, matching. I mean, you can think about various activities, but at the same time, you really have to provide the opportunity, right? Exactly. To explore, as you're saying there, to share experiences. Perfect. All righty. Let's look at tip number 4. And tip number 4 is to include sustainability in your lessons. And basically, this comes from Harry Waters. Part of the beauty of being an English teacher is to be able to talk about anything, right? We just have to use the language in a way. So we can use this opportunity to really find topics that are big or small, but people can be agents, topics that are important for that context. So how about, let's say, how would you participate? And it doesn't have to be anything grandiose. It could be something that's part of your daily life. For example, I've jotted down here some ideas about, let's say, reducing waste, right? So it's for us to be able to change the world one step at a time, as Harry Waters likes to put it, but recycling projects, right? What else? Arts and crafts. I mean, using cartons of milk in order for you to produce something new, or coming up with ideas to improve the conditions in your class, in your school, for example. Let's say the water fountain, you know, how to make it, how to make the water cooler, for example. Things like that. The environment, how can we help? If we cannot work with anything that's super huge, or let's say that will impact many people at once, we can start incrementally, right? So yeah, I think I have here what's the most important thing is to really focus on an inclusive environment, really focus on bringing these topics and letting everybody be heard, right? Actively listening to everybody. So this is tip number 4, right? I mean, in tip number 5, I'm just keeping track of time here with a little timer here, to encourage students to be themselves in English, right? This is a session from Rona Snelling, and she basically was asking which type of English will give students the best mileage. Again, we're just thinking about the students. We're putting ourselves in their shoes. So in the world, we have 80% of English speakers as non-native speakers, and 20% are native speakers. So, I mean, things are shifting, right? I mean, learners, they can realize that there are more important things in the context of global English, right? Sometimes it might be counterproductive to really work on things that are not really hindering communication. So the main goal, basically, Rana says, is for effective communication strategies, and teachers as facilitators of knowledge, we have to help students with negotiating meaning, you know, dealing with communication breakdowns. What is a breakdown? And if it's something that's just like too rigid in terms of grammar, rules and everything, I mean, to really focus, if I say, if I was, or interrupt someone and you really are not doing anything what's human about it, you know, and what's human about it is just communication, listen to others. And with global English, what's most important, not for us to have any breakdowns. It's not really, I mean, just the let's say fancy schmancy stuff, you know, the literary, the elevated. It's really teaching students. Tip number six, teach students to notice who they are interacting with. So it's a great idea for us to see learners as these agents, okay? Again, this comes from Rona. And so we have to make them feel welcome, okay? And in order to do so, fit in intercultural environments, right? How do we deal with respect? How are we polite? Do we understand each other's cultures, you know? Barrier, passionate. Are we actively listening to people, you know? Are we being flexible? So that's where we put ourselves like empaths, right? I mean, we're working with empathy. And let me just give you concrete examples. Let's say, adapt your language. I mean, if you have a very literary, verbose language and the context doesn't really allow you to do that, simplify, explain, give examples, make it visual, right? I mean, try to be there for the other, be mindful, right? I mean, pick your choices, level of formality, right? The length of the sentences. So use emojis, use ways to communicate that will really that show that you're really worried about the situation, that you're really trying to put effort into understanding, right? I mean, being a diplomat of these situations. So tip number 6 is about that, you know, we have to be agents. We have to find opportunities. Let's see if I forgot anything. Oh, create stories together. Something important is, I mean, if I have a colleague of mine here and they love to use certain expressions but I don't. Okay, let me create a story using your expressions, using your ideas, you know, let's collaborate, but I'm going to use your ideas. And this, you know, makes people feel that they're appreciated, right? Exactly like Hui is saying, you know, being mindful. That's how we bond. Exactly. That's key for us as facilitators of knowledge, you know, to be like mediators. All righty. We got tip number 7. So tip number 7 is to understand your own emotions and to better manage them. So explore techniques. I mean, breathing, this comes from Emma Reynolds. It's the stress busting meditations for busy teachers. This is something that we want to help students because of like well-being, but we need to do it ourselves, right? We have to really apply practice. It's praxis, as in Latin, and the first step is to learn how to understand my own emotions as a teacher. So I'm going to do like a 3-step breathing technique. Okay. First, I'm going to bring myself to the present moment. I'm here with you. I'm aware of my body, my surroundings, right? My eyes. I'm staring right now, trying to picture that you're there in your office, in your living room. What are my thoughts about that? It's great to connect with so many people in the world, right? I acknowledge this experience. I relax. I pay attention to my rhythm, okay, to my connection with nature. That's why it's beautiful to go for a walk and to really breathe and take your time and experience the moment. Because anxiety is exactly thinking about the future, which is just abstract. I mean, what about the moment? What about this moment that we have right now, right? So tune in to this state of the present and enjoy. I mean, it's great that we're spending time here together. So how about, let's say we take a deep breath, right? We take the time to really cherish the opportunity. Okay, and we use lots of facial expressions. This will provide a way to give cues, right? Not for us to be like in this automatic pilot mode, and for us to really connect. So that's basically tip number 7. Tip number 8. It's very similar and introduce mindfulness elements into the classroom, and this comes from Katerina Protsenko. The session is titled "Helping Learners Manage Pressure," because right now, I mean, we do have that in society with work and with assignments and everything. So we do have to help our learners manage pressure. We can't tell students, "Oh, just be calm." We need to demonstrate, right? We have to teach, we have to facilitate. And one simple way for us to do so is to inhale for 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds, and exhale for 4 seconds. So, this will lower my heart rate. So I go in and I count, in my head. And this will help us to be more in the, in the moment. And I'm demonstrating. So again, this is important for us to connect as a team, for us to be in the same, because things are about frequencies, like the energy levels. And we don't want to be anxious about anything. We want to really take the opportunity and really enjoy the moment, right? So that was a great tip from Katerina. And and just explain the benefits. I mean, that's something that I wrote down here. Explain the benefits. Within time, these atomic habits are going to help students and ourselves to better interact and to better understand how our bodies work. Okay, let's go to tip number 9. So we stick to the time here. Loosen up about language errors. Many times we're just really strict about language mistakes, errors, things like that. And it comes down to effective communication. That's the main goal for us. Certain areas are more important than others, right? So if we're just like, oh, what's the grammar, the vocabulary, or the pronunciation, we're not really worrying about the contexts. Is this international communication? What is the context, right? I mean, is it leading to breakdowns? So let's just be smart about the battles that we pick, right? Let's focus on the needs of that specific situation. Sometimes, again, the mistakes can be just irrelevant. For example, let's say the TH sound. I mean, is it really hindering any sort of communication there? Is it really helping? If not, then maybe it's just not the time now So what is more important for the student and not for the curriculum, for the scope and sequence per se, you know? And it's not because we have to follow certain things that we're not going to consider what the best thing is for that moment for that student. So some errors are more equal than others. It means that we can focus on communication, basically, effective communication. And tip number 10, actually, with that regard, we're going to talk about positive washback. Ethan Mansour, he wanted to promote positive washback from proficiency exams. And, you know, we have to teach exams in a different way, right? I mean, we have to be obviously mindful of the context. So we have to minimize negative washback and pitfalls that we might find ourselves in are, for example, let's say, because of the exam, you just have a narrow curriculum. You have, let's say, not many authentic possibilities. This will lead to potential decrease in motivation. So we want to focus on positive washback, which is motivation, engagement, satisfaction. How do we do that with exams, right? We can twist the format. We can analyze wrong answers, but now with the right answers in a way that it will give and provide the context. We can worry about things that were distractors. We can set clear learning objectives. We can expand and not really treat the whole thing as a subset. We can look at the larger set. So these things will deal with input and will be like a springboard for people to learn more. And let's say we can get the ideas from the exam and expand, create projects, learn more about the topics. All right. Okay. I think these are the 10 tips that I had for you. I'm also at the same time concomitantly trying to check the chat box here. And yeah, and it's been great. I tried to stick to the time slot. Will is back there, and I try to interact with the chat there. It's an amazing opportunity, Will, here to be with you and to share these ideas from our webinars, because the season was very creative, important about, let's say, global speakers, and the fact that we are getting ideas and opportunities from so many people in the world. And it's just an amazing opportunity.
It really is, Alex. Thanks so much for putting all that together. What an absolute marathon. I really appreciate the work. You sort of delved into the last year of the program. I hope you enjoyed it as well. And yeah, really nice output from that work you did, Alex. Thanks so much. Yeah, no, I agree. I think the program this year has been just, I mean, it's so enjoyable. And just so everyone knows, you may not know this, I don't know if you care or not, but we all planned the whole program together. It's a really sort of a global effort. Louise, Greg, Nathan, Alex, Juan, Monica, everyone who's involved in this, Janza, Lemmy, everyone who's talking, and many more people are involved in this. We really put a lot of thinking into it, and a lot of it is based on what you say, but based on what the teaching community wants and needs from for their teacher development. So, and also a massive thanks to you for if you've ever had a voice, if you've filled in a survey, you've been part of, I don't know, maybe some research we've been doing for one of our courses, or you've met one of our reps, or anything. All of that has fed into this program, and it's sort of all been sort of fed through all the different channels we've got to chat with each other internally, and that's what ends up as the program. So thanks a lot to all of you for being involved in it, if you were, and for coming as well, for working on your teaching to help deliver these great lessons and deliver those great futures for those kids and adults that we've got in the classrooms. Hey, Louise, Nathan, Alex, you there?
Yes.
Hey.
We're back.
Yes,
We're all here. Good to see you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Alex.
Thanks. Yeah,
Nathan.
thanks a lot, Alex.
Nathan, Louise.
Yeah.
I'm just going to share. I haven't shared the screen yet, so there's the adult tips for you. I'm just going to leave them on the screen just for a little bit. We did actually have a question for you, Alex. We're running a couple of minutes over, but if you don't mind, Alex, I've got a question for you from somebody. They said they were reading, I think it was Misery, by Stephen King. Yeah, Misery. I mean, I've only seen the film, but I imagine the book's relatively similar to the film. So quite a dark story. We're talking about adults anyway, so that's not an issue, that it's dark necessarily. But he was thinking about the way that we approach these extensive reading texts. Do you recommend that in class if you've got students for an extended period of time to actually go through a novel with them and delve into it with rather sort of critical questions as you go through, or not? Do you think it's better in sort of shorter bite-sized chunks?
Well, maybe the answer would be more like it depends, but my take would be to really focus on my context. So let's say I might have a student who really likes the story, but maybe the type of let's say content and quantity of words in that case I would have to adjust. So I would facilitate the access to the story and make it more like bite-sized. If the context allows me to work with the text as is, then I'm going to do that. So it's like Louise and Nathan were discussing with differentiated instruction and just trying to really find ways to it's not about the product, it's about whoever's actually consuming that product, right? I mean, what's going to be emotionally attached in order for me to work with motivation and everything. So I think there's always a way for us to really develop. And Misery, there is a movie actually, I think it's from the 90s, an adaptation.
Yes, it's
right?
a big film. Yeah,
It's a big film. Yeah.
Who's the actress in it? I've forgotten her name. She was in. Catherine.
It's James.
James Caan.
James Caan and
yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I can see her. Wow, it was.
But yeah, I mean, I think
performance. Kathy Bates. Yes.
Kathy Bates. Well, yeah, an amazing performance. So it's multiliteracies, right? I mean, it's a perfect opportunity for us to work with multiliteracies. I mean, whether it's the book or the movie, and whether it's like bite-sized. I don't know if you all agree with me, but
I certainly do agree. I think, I mean, just to add another format in there, I listen to audiobooks a lot. I mean, that's later in life I've realized that I actually do love listening to books more than I do like reading books. I think that's just also another way to engage students. So just to reiterate what you said, Alex, I think if they're using a format and a text that the students like and that they're sort of impassioned by, then why not? You know, I think it probably needs to accompany a sort of a wider course of study, not only that, but I'm assuming that's not what they meant. And I would absolutely encourage that, so long as they kind of generally like Misery as a text, and they like, you know, reading extensive text as well, because you might have some students that don't really like reading extensive text, and they see it as a bit, that's quite a large chore, I'd say, for someone who doesn't really enjoy reading. I think it's fine to not enjoy reading, to love reading novels, because not everyone does.
And it could be an opportunity for them. Let's think if somebody really likes TikTok, or if somebody likes to do like more like influencer type of, how would you describe Misery in 1 minute, right? In a TikTok video, in a way, like how would you make it your own idea? So try to transform that. All these opportunities as a teacher, this is the beauty of, right? I mean, working with so many opportunities. Yeah. So just fun.
Cool. Thanks a lot, Alex.
Yep.
Appreciate it. Okay, so we've got a couple of things to say to you right now. I'm going to move on. I hope you've seen enough of the tips. You're going to see more of them this second. So in the next week or so, you're going to get an email from us. And there's going to be a couple of things in there. It's going to be, well, exactly 2 things in there. The first is going to be your personalized certificate if you're watching on Zoom. If you're on Facebook, LinkedIn, or YouTube, you can get a link, which will be in the chat either now or in the next minute or so, where you can get your certificate there as well. Yep, thanks a lot, Jans. We've got a session later if you'd like to see it again, delivered by Monica, Juan, and Lemmy. So that's the first thing in that email. The second thing in the email is going to be linked to a virtual goodie bag. And inside the virtual goodie bag are many wonderful things. We haven't got any cups. We can't send you a cup by email. I've done that joke before. I remember I've done that before. But we can't send you a physical thing by email. So we've got some digital gifts for you. The first thing is going to be the Guide to Teacher Development Volume 3. So this is a comprehensive ebook, and it covers all of the training we've done this season, a little bit from before that as well, to sort of put it into a package that allows you to explore, firstly at your own pace, but also by your own preference. So if you want to focus on a particular area of teaching, like digital teaching, or you want to work on developing an inclusive environment in class, then we've got areas dedicated to various ELT sort of realms. So hopefully that's something you're going to be interested in using. Obviously, it's perpetual, so you just get it and you can bookmark it on your browser or whatever, or download it, and you can just have it and print it out for your staff room, whatever you like. It's there for you. That's the first thing. The second thing, which we're actually going to share with you now, is all of the tips that Nathan, Louise, and Alex have shared with you. There you go. Thanks a lot, Dario. So that's your link to a PDF, which has got all the 30 tips, and they're all hyperlinked as well to the webinars or the blog articles that everyone was talking about throughout their talks today. So yes, do go take a look at that. That PDF is for you. And keep an eye out for that email. It'll be there within about a week. So yeah, thanks a lot, Nathan, Louise, Alex. Nathan and Louise, I've got to give a double thank you, because this is the second time you've done this today. So thanks for doing it this morning. Thanks for doing it this afternoon. Alex, thanks so much for doing it this afternoon as well. It was awesome. You guys are always awesome. I love working with you. We're all going to be.
It was a pleasure. It was a pleasure.
Same here.
Likewise.
Amazing.
Working with you guys.
Likewise.
Great. And everybody out there. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Thanks a lot. Pleasure as well. And we're actually in the midst of, we've all got we're having meetings over these weeks, already thinking about the next season. So it'll be coming soon. So I think before we go, I'm not going to take any more of your time up. That's the certificate. You're going to get it in the email. I've already told you about that. Before we go, I'm going to leave you with this marvelous video to wrap up the season. But goodbye from me, and have a wonderful holiday if you're about to have one. See you all in the next season. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
See you soon. Bye.
Great teaching happens in every corner of this planet. With teachers' dedication, inspiration, and desire to advance themselves, they offer their students the greatest possible gift. The gift of good, solid learning. The Advancing Learning academic program is our gift to you, to help you deliver great teaching no matter your context. In our biggest season so far, we've seen a whole range of training, big and small, including the world-famous Global Teachers Festival back in February. We've seen topics like social emotional learning, culture in the classroom, the age-old mystery of motivation, English as a lingua franca, hybrid teaching. I could go on. And on. And on. So whenever you're ready to continue your teaching journey, the Advancing Learning academic program will be waiting. Go to macmillanenglish.com/ALAP to find the right training for you for free now.